What is up, everybody? It is Rust Belt Perspective here. Today is Sunday, March 26, 2024, and today we're going to take another look at the 2024 gubernatorial elections that are set to take place alongside all the other elections this November with the presidential races, the Senate races, and the House races. And of course, there's only 11 governor races up for re-election this year. And a lot of them, the partisan lean is obvious based on the state, but there are some surprisingly competitive races in here, and there's only 3 incumbents out of this 11 that are running for re-election, so we are, at the very least, about to see a fresh coat of paint with a lot of new faces. So without further ado, let's take a look. We'll start out with the 3 incumbents that are rerunning. We'll start out in Utah. Republican Spencer Cox is running for his second term after he handily won in 2020. No surprise there, given the state's heavy Republican partisan lean. And yeah, so he should have no problem winning renomination there, and whatever Democratic candidate challenges him, but doesn't really stand a chance. Spencer Cox has been just fine in his first term as far as Utah is concerned. He is popular enough there to win, no problem. Speaking of popular, we got Phil Scott in the state of Vermont, who, of course, Vermont is a very deeply Democratic state. They voted for President Biden by 35 points, I believe, last time around. But Phil Scott, a very popular liberal Republican who appeals to the bipartisanship of Vermont, he was very strongly debating on running for a 5th 2-year term or not. Keep in mind, Vermont and New Hampshire are the only 2 states to have 2-year governor terms. But yeah, Phil Scott finally, this in the middle of the spring, declared that he would run for a 5th term in Vermont. And with given how popular he is, he should have no problem winning. I mean, you look just back to 2022, you had Scott winning the state by 47 points with 70% of the vote share. He is insanely popular, should have no problem winning there. And I mean, even before that, winning by 41 across the board. Phil Scott popular, despite how deep blue of a state Vermont is. And then the final incumbent that is rerunning is Greg Gianforte of Montana, and I will consider that a safe Republican state as well. Gianforte is popular there, and of course Montana does have a deep partisan lean of Republican, much like Utah does. And Gianforte is polling pretty close to Donald Trump in this state, and Donald Trump, of course, being the Republican frontrunner for the presidency, he is going to win here just fine, just as Gianforte will. So Gianforte will get elected to his second term, just like Spencer Cox will in Utah, and Phil Scott with his 5th term in Utah. So now, that is it for all the incumbents. The remaining 8 of these races are all going to be new faces, whether it be because of retirements or term limits. So, let's take a look. In North Dakota, incumbent Doug Burgum, he ran for Republican presidential nomination, but that was never really expected to go anywhere, and it didn't. And Burgum, with a grandfather clause in the North Dakota Constitution, was eligible to run for a 3rd term, but ultimately decided not to. And the deep frontrunner there is Kelly Armstrong, who is the at-large representative for North Dakota in the United States House. Armstrong is polling very well, and there is little doubt that Armstrong will get that Republican nomination and ultimately that governorship, as North Dakota, much like Montana and Utah, is a deep Republican state. I mean, I'm pretty sure North Dakota voted for Trump by over 30 in 2020. It's been deeply Republican for a long time. And then over in Indiana, that was also a safe Republican governorship. Incumbent United States Senator Mike Braun is retiring after 1 term in the Senate to run for governor in the governorship instead, as incumbent Eric Holcomb is term limited. And Mike Braun, he's been polling just fine the entire time. If I'm not mistaken, he does have that Trump endorsement. There's very little doubt that Mike Braun, who's already well-known statewide in a deep Republican state, should win regardless of who challenges Braun on the Democratic side of the aisle. And then in West Virginia, arguably the deepest Republican state in the nation, popular incumbent governor Jim Justice is term limited. He's running for United States Senate instead. So Republican that ended up winning that nomination was Patrick Morrisey, who has been is involved in West Virginia politics for a long time. He unsuccessfully ran against Joe Manchin for the United States Senate in 2018, but decided to run for the governor nomination this time, and it was a competitive primary. His closest challenger was Moore Capito, the son of Senator Shelley Moore Capito, but ultimately Morrisey prevailed, and he is all but expected to become the next governor of West Virginia. One final safe state, which is actually for the Democrats this time, is Delaware. It is a competitive Democratic primary in Delaware, as the incumbent governor is term limited, but nonetheless, Delaware, one of the deepest blue states in the nation, of course, the home state of President Joe Biden. This governorship will stay blue no problem. It's not a matter of which party, but which candidate will win. It is a competitive Democratic primary in Delaware. So now we'll get into the 4 most competitive states of this cycle. And I mean, on paper, some of them might surprise you. Washington has been a deep Democratic state for a long time, as Missouri has been for the Republicans. Even New Hampshire has been leaning Democratic in recent years, and North Carolina is probably the one that doesn't really surprise you. But diving deeper into these races, you'll see why I do have them as more competitive than the rest of these. So looking at Missouri, the Republican frontrunner is Jay Ashcroft, who has been their Secretary of State since 2017. So he has some statewide recognition, of course, being in that statewide position, and he's also the son of former Governor John Ashcroft, the Ashcroft name is known in Missouri. And Ashcroft's doing fine on the poll, so on paper this should seem like a given for Ashcroft, and it's very likely that he will win, but he does have a noble challenger in Crystal Quade, the minority leader of the Missouri House of Representatives, who has gotten a number of endorsements, especially throughout the state. And you look at the polls between Quade and Ashcroft. If I can do my ABCs here, figure out where Missouri's at. Here we go. You look at it, Ashcroft, he's polling plus 17. So he is doing fine on the one poll between him and Quade, and plus that's more than the 15 he needs for a solid Republican threshold. But Quade, she does pose a decent threat, a better threat than most any other candidate would pose against him. So I could see this race being still double digits for Ashcroft, but maybe not quite 15, so it could be a little bit competitive. So I will consider that one a likely Republican. And then taking a look at the state of Washington, this is where things get surprisingly interesting. Jay Inslee is the incumbent governor for, I believe, 3 terms. Is retiring, will not run for a 4th term, as Washington does not have any term limits for their governors. And the Democratic frontrunner from the beginning has been Bob Ferguson, their Attorney General right here. And on the Republican side, he surprisingly does have a worthy challenger in Dave Reichert, their former United States representative, who was representative there for 14 years before he retired from the United States House. And this race is, again, surprisingly competitive. Ferguson, he is being endorsed heavily by the 2 United States senators from Washington, Inslee himself, the incumbent governor, and Reichert doesn't have as many endorsements, but you'll see he is pulling surprisingly well against Ferguson. If you look, almost every single one of these polls is biased. Actually, every single one of them, except for one, is biased by one party. But you see, like, this has been competitive across the board. This is the top 2 primary that you see on the top, but in the general election, Ferguson plus 6. You got one where Reichert's plus 9. Granted, all of these polls are biased, so we don't really have an unbiased poll here, but Reichert plus 9, Ferguson plus 8, plus 4. But nonetheless, you're seeing single digits across the board here, so at the very least, this is a competitive governor's race to some capacity. And Washington has elected a Democratic governor every single election since 1984. They came very close in, I believe, 2004. It was like a matter of 100 votes or something like that. But I mean, who knows? Maybe Washington wants a fresh coat of paint, and wants to mix things up with the Republican governor for once. Probably not. The state has been deeply Democratic for a long time, a part of that blue wall. So it's leaning Ferguson's way, but this race definitely does have the makings of being a single-digit competitive race. I will consider it leaning Ferguson's way, but I would not say he firmly has a grip on this one. So then we get into by far the two most interesting governor races of this cycle. We've got New Hampshire and North Carolina. We'll start out with New Hampshire. Popular Republican Governor Chris Sununu is retiring. He's just got elected to his fourth two-year term, which will total 8 years for Sununu by the time he's done, but he is calling it quits. He has been popular, very popular throughout his tenure. He won by 31 points. This is in 2020, he won by 31. Just this past in 2022, he still won by 15. So despite the fact that New Hampshire has been a lot more blue federally, Sununu has done quite well with popularity. But now that he's retiring, it's a wide open race. But in both sides of the aisle do have a viable candidate. On the Republican side, Kelly Ayotte, the former United States Senator, who is very electable in the state. I'll get to the numbers on that in a minute. She is running, and she is by far the front runner. And on the Democratic side, Joyce Craig, the mayor of Manchester, which is the most populated city in New Hampshire, she is running, and she is the front runner for her party. So both parties have, again, viable candidates here. And looking at the polls between the two, it remains competitive. If I could do my ABCs again, New Hampshire. You got Ayotte and Craig doing great in the primary polls, but when you put them together, you got Ayotte +4 over Craig. Again, this is from last November, so I'm sure things have changed from then. And I mean, all the way back to August, you've got Ayotte +9, but that was the day that Ayotte declared because Chris Sununu retired just a few days before that. So there was some boom behind Ayotte's name right at that moment. But nonetheless, we've got a very competitive governor's race here between Ayotte and Craig. And I honestly believe that it is leaning Ayotte's way. You look back in 2010, Kelly Ayotte, this was one of the deepest red years nationwide in recent memory. Kelly Ayotte won by 23 points. She absolutely crushed it in 2010. Granted, this was a year that you had Illinois going red and Colorado barely staying blue. Like, even Washington barely staying blue. Ayotte, she crushed it big time. And 2016, when she ran for re-election, it was very close, but that was not because Ayotte was a bad candidate by any means. She had a very worthy challenger in another popular governor in Maggie Hassan, who she won by, like, less than 1,000 votes, I think it was. I don't have the numbers on me, but you see 0.14. It was so close. Ayotte almost beat up the popular Democratic governor of the state. And Ayotte has stayed out of politics since then, but she's jumped back into the race here. She is very electable in the state, has remained in the eye of the public view in the state for quite some time. I do believe that she will retain that governorship for the Republicans here in New Hampshire. Chris Sununu is backing her, and like, this is a state that has split ticketed, as I've shown you. They voted for Sununu and Biden at the same time. So I'm confident that we will see Governor Ayotte here, but I could be wrong because Joyce Craig is very electable as well. And now, on to the final one, the one that has been the biggest question mark from the beginning, regardless of candidate quality, North Carolina. Popular Democratic incumbent Roy Cooper is retiring. And both sides of the aisle, much like in New Hampshire, do have very viable candidates. On the Democratic side, they've already gone through their nominations. Josh Stein, the Attorney General, these last 8 years under Governor Cooper, is the nominee here. No surprise there, he'd been leading the entire time. And much like the Republican side, Mark Robinson, the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina since 2021, He had been leading in the polls from the beginning, and unsurprisingly, he is going to run, or he is running, and he is already the Republican nominee. So we've got a race set up between Josh Stein and Mark Robinson. Take a look at the polls here. And we've got a lot of back and forth polls, a lot of evens in there. You got a Stein +1, but that one's Democratic biased. You got some Robinson +5s in there, a Stein +9. And these are all recent polls from this spring. And it is clearly a competitive race between the two, and it could totally go either way. That being said, I am going to consider it lean Democratic. Now, on the federal level, North Carolina is a state that the Republicans continue to win regardless. You've seen Trump won there, Romney won there, and all in years that the state was supposed to be competitive. Even when the national mood was bad against Trump in 2020, Trump still won. You've seen Bud win, you've seen Tillis win. But on the state level, the state is different. North Carolina loves to split ticket. Back in 2020, when you had Trump winning by 1.3, like I just said, you compare that to the governor's ballot, same ballot, Roy Cooper wins by 4.5. That's almost a 6-point swing in favor of Governor Cooper. In 2016, you had Governor Cooper very narrowly unseat the Republican incumbent McCrory. So, voted in Cooper by 0.22 on the same ballot that Trump won by 3.7. That's about a 4-point swing in favor of the Democrats in the state. And it doesn't end there. 2012, Romney won by 2 points in North Carolina in the competitive year. While on the Republican side of the aisle, they did have a much bigger win. So that was a 9-point difference between the governor race and the presidential race there. I could keep going. 2008, you had Purdue win by 3.4, and Obama very narrowly won the state the last time the state went blue on federally at all by 0.33. So there was a 3-point swing there. Not too big, but that's all the way back in 2008. But you see the point. There really does not seem to be much of a correlation between the governor race and presidential race at all when North Carolina voters go to cast their vote. So I do believe that Josh Stein will prevail. He has the backing of Roy Cooper, the popular Democratic incumbent governor, which I think will help more in that case than the whole Trump polling well in North Carolina. So I believe that North Carolina's governorship stays blue, and ultimately every governorship returns to the party that is currently holding it. And so that's how I think it's going to go, but we have some interesting things here. We're seeing a lot of new names across the board, some competitive races in North Carolina, New Hampshire, and even, in my opinion, Washington. You could even make a case for Missouri. So that's all I got. Please comment down below what you think. What do you like? Where do you think I'm going wrong here? Yeah, please like and subscribe for more. This is Rust Belt Perspective, signing out.